a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, also known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria or Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, Islamic State, and by its Arabic language acronym Daesh, is a Salafi jihadist terrorist organization and former unrecognized proto-state that follows a fundamentalist, Wahhabi, and heterodox doctrine of Sunni Islam. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant gained global prominence in early 2014 when it drove Iraqi government forces out of key cities in its western Iraq offensive, followed by its capture of Mosul and the Sinjar massacre. This group has been designated a terrorist organization by the United Nations and many individual countries. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is widely known for its videos of beheadings and other types of executions of both soldiers and civilians, including journalists and aid workers, and its destruction of cultural heritage sites. The United Nations holds Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant responsible for human rights abuses and war crimes, and Amnesty International has charged the group with ethnic cleansing on a historic scale. In northern Iraq, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant originated as Jamaat al-Tawhid wal-Jihad in 1999, which pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda and participated in the Iraqi insurgency following the 2003 invasion of Iraq by Western forces. The group proclaimed itself a worldwide caliphate and began referring to itself as the Islamic State or IS in June 2014. As a caliphate, it claims religious, political and military authority over all Muslims worldwide. Its adoption of the name Islamic State and its idea of a caliphate have been widely criticized, with the United Nations, various governments and mainstream Muslim groups rejecting its statehood. In Syria, the group conducted ground attacks on both government forces and opposition factions, and by December 2015 it held a large area in western Iraq and eastern Syria, containing an estimated 2.8 to 8 million people, where it enforced its heterodox interpretation of Sharia law. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is believed to be operational in 18 countries across the world, including Afghanistan and Pakistan, with aspiring branches in Mali, Egypt, Somalia, Bangladesh, Indonesia and the Philippines. In 2015, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant was estimated to have an annual budget of more than $1 billion and a force of more than 30,000 fighters. In July 2017, the group lost control of its largest city, Mosul, to the Iraqi army. Following this major defeat, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant continued to lose territory to the various states and other military forces allied against it, until it controlled no meaningful territory. By November 2017, U.S. military officials reported in December 2017 that the group attained a mere 2% of the territory they had previously held. On the 10th of December 2017, Iraq's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said that Iraqi forces had driven the last remnants of Islamic State from the country, 3 years after the militant group captured about a third of Iraq's territory. Name. In April 2013, having expanded into Syria, the group adopted the name. As al-Sham is a region often compared with the Levant or Greater Syria, the group's name has been variously translated as Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. While the use of either one or the other acronym has been the subject of debate, the distinction between the two and its relevance has been considered not so great. Of greater relevance is the name Daesh, which is an acronym of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's Arabic name al-Dawla al-Islamiyya fi al-Iraq wa al-Sham. Daesh, or Daesh. This name has been widely used by Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's Arabic-speaking detractors, although and to a certain extent, because it is considered derogatory, as it resembles the Arabic words Dis and Dias. Within areas under its control, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant considers use of the name Daesh punishable by flogging or cutting out the tongue. In late June 2014, the group renamed itself, declaring itself a worldwide caliphate. The name, Islamic State, and the group's claim to be a caliphate have been widely rejected, with the UN, various governments, and mainstream Muslim groups refusing to use the new name. The group's declaration of a new caliphate in June 2014 and its adoption of the name Islamic State have been criticized and ridiculed by Muslim scholars and rival Islamists both inside and outside the territory it controls. In a speech in September 2014, United States President Barack Obama said that Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is neither Islamic, nor is it a state, while many object to using the name Islamic State, owing to the far-reaching religious and political claims to authority which that name implies. The United Nations Security Council, the United States, Canada, Turkey, Australia, Russia, the United Kingdom, and other countries generally call the group Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, while much of the Arab world uses the Arabic acronym Daesh. France's Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said, "This is a terrorist group and not a state. I do not recommend using the term Islamic State, because it blurs the lines between Islam, Muslims, and Islamists. The Arabs call it Daesh and I will be calling them the Daesh cutthroats." Retired General John Allen, the U.S. envoy appointed to coordinate the coalition, U.S. Army Lieutenant General James Terry, head of operations against the group, and Secretary of State John Kerry had all shifted towards use of the term Daesh by December 2014. Ideology. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is a theocracy, proto-state and a Salafi or Wahhabi group. ISIS considers itself being radical Salafi Islam. Salafi Islam is a strict, puritanical form of orthodox Sunni Islam, while others often see it as an heterodox interpretation of Islam. ISIS promotes religious violence, and regards Muslims who do not agree with its interpretations as infidels or apostates. According to Haider al-Hayy, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's philosophy is represented by the symbolism in the black standard variant of the legendary battle flag of Prophet Muhammad that it has adopted. The flag shows the seal of Muhammad within a white circle, with the phrase above it, "There is no God but Allah." Such symbolism has been said to point to Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's belief that it represents the restoration of the caliphate of early Islam, with all the political, religious, and eschatological ramifications that this would imply. According to some observers, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant emerged from the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, the first post-Ottoman Islamist group dating back to the late 1920s in Egypt. It adheres to global jihadist principles and follows the hardline ideology of al-Qaeda and many other modern-day jihadist groups. However, other sources trace the group's roots to Wahhabism. According to The Economist, dissidents in the former Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant capital of Raqqa report that all 12 of the judges who now run its court system are Saudis. Saudi practices also followed by the group include the establishment of religious police to root out vice and enforce attendance at Salat prayers, the widespread use of capital punishment, and the destruction or repurposing of any non-Sunni religious buildings. Bernard Hakel has described Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's creed as a kind of untamed Wahhabism. Senior Saudi religious leaders have issued statements condemning Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant and attempting to distance the group from official Saudi religious beliefs. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant aims to return to the early days of Islam, rejecting all innovations in the religion, which it believes corrupts its original spirit. It condemns later caliphates and the Ottoman Empire for deviating from what it calls pure Islam, and seeks to revive the original Wahhabi project of the restoration of the caliphate governed by strict Salafist doctrine. Following Salafi Wahhabi tradition, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant condemns the followers of secular law as disbelievers, putting the current Saudi Arabian government in that category. Salafists such as Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant believe that only a legitimate authority can undertake the leadership of jihad, and that the first priority over other areas of combat, such as fighting non-Muslim countries, is the purification of Islamic society. For example, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant regards the Palestinian Sunni group Hamas as apostates who have no legitimate authority to lead jihad, and see fighting Hamas as the first step toward confrontation by Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant with Israel. Islamic eschatology. One difference between Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant and other Islamist and jihadist movements, including al-Qaeda, is the group's emphasis on eschatology and apocalypticism, that is, a belief in a final day of judgment by God, and specifically, a belief that the arrival of one known as Imam Mahdi is near. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant believes that it will defeat the army of Rome at the town of Dabiq, in fulfillment of prophecy. Following its interpretation of the Hadith of the 12 successors, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant also believes that after al-Baghdadi there will be only 4 more legitimate caliphs. The noted scholar of militant Islamism Will McCants writes, Goals. Since at least 2004, a significant goal of the group has been the foundation of a Sunni Islamic State. Specifically, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant has sought to establish itself as a caliphate, an Islamic state led by a group of religious authorities under a supreme leader, the caliph, who is believed to be the successor to Prophet Muhammad. In June 2014, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant published a document in which it claimed to have traced the lineage of its leader al-Baghdadi back to Muhammad, and upon proclaiming a new caliphate on the 29th of June, the group appointed al-Baghdadi as its caliph. As caliph, he demands the allegiance of all devout Muslims worldwide, according to Islamic jurisprudence. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant has detailed its goals in its Dabiq magazine, saying it will continue to seize land and take over the entire earth until it's, according to German journalist Jürgen Todenhofer, who spent 10 days embedded with Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in Mosul. The view he kept hearing was that Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant wants to conquer the world, and that all who do not believe in the group's interpretation of the Quran will be killed. Todenhofer was struck by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant fighters' belief that all religions who agree with democracy have to die, and by their incredible enthusiasm, including enthusiasm for killing hundreds of millions of people. When the caliphate was proclaimed, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant stated, the legality of all emirates, groups, states, and organizations becomes null by the expansion of the caliphate's authority and arrival of its troops to their areas. This was a rejection of the political divisions in southwestern Asia that were established by the UK and France during World War I in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. All non-Muslim areas would be targeted for conquest after the Muslim lands were dealt with, according to the Islamist Manual Management of Savagery. Strategy. Documents found after the death of Samir Abd Muhammad al-Khifawi, a former colonel in the intelligence service of the Iraqi Air Force before the U.S. invasion, who had been described as the strategic head of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, detailed planning for the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant takeover of northern Syria, which made possible the group's later advances into Iraq. Al-Khifawi called for the infiltration of areas to be conquered with spies who would find out as much as possible about the target towns, who lived there, who was in charge, which families were religious, which Islamic school of religious jurisprudence they belonged to, how many mosques there were, who the imam was, how many wives and children he had, and how old they were. Following this surveillance and espionage would come murder and kidnapping, the elimination of every person who might have been a potential leader or opponent. In Raqqa, after rebel forces drove out the Assad regime and Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant infiltrated the town, first dozens and then hundreds of people disappeared. Security and intelligence expert Martin Reardon has described Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's purpose as being to psychologically break those under its control, so as to ensure their absolute allegiance through fear and intimidation, while generating outright hate and vengeance among its enemies. Jason Burke, a journalist writing on Salafi jihadism, has written that Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's goal is to terrorize, mobilize, and polarize. Its efforts to terrorize are intended to intimidate civilian populations and force governments of the target enemy to make rash decisions that they otherwise would not choose. It aims to mobilize its supporters by motivating them with, for example, spectacular deadly attacks deep in Western territory, to polarize by driving Muslim populations, particularly in the West, away from their governments, thus increasing the appeal of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's self-proclaimed caliphate among them, and to eliminate neutral parties through either absorption or elimination. Journalist Trukmini Maria Kalamachi also emphasizes Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's interest in polarization, or in eliminating what it calls the gray zone, between the black and white. The grey is moderate Muslims who are living in the West and are happy and feel engaged in the society here. A work published online in 2004 entitled Management of Savagery, described by several media outlets as influential on Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant and intended to provide a strategy to create a new Islamic caliphate, recommended a strategy of attack outside its territory in which fighters would diversify and widen the vexation strikes against the Crusader Zionist enemy in every place in the Islamic world, and even outside of it if possible, so as to disperse the efforts of the alliance of the enemy and thus drain it to the greatest extent possible. The group has been accused of attempting to bolster morale and distract attention from its loss of territory to enemies by staging terror attacks abroad. Leadership and governance. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is headed and run by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Before their deaths, he had two deputy leaders, Abu Muslim al-Turkmani for Iraq and Abu Ali al-Anbari for Syria, both ethnic Turkmen. Advising al-Baghdadi as a cabinet of senior leaders, while its operations in Iraq and Syria are controlled by local governors. Beneath the leaders are councils on finance, leadership, military matters, legal matters, foreign fighters assistance, security, intelligence and media. In addition, a Shura Council has the task of ensuring that all decisions made by the governors and councils comply with the group's heterodox interpretation of Sharia. While al-Baghdadi has told followers to advise me when I err in sermons, according to observers, any threat, opposition, or even contradiction is instantly eradicated. According to Iraqis, Syrians, and analysts who study the group, almost all of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's leaders, including the members of its military and security committees, and the majority of its emirs and princes, are former Iraqi military and intelligence officers. Specifically former members of Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath government who lost their jobs and pensions in the de-Baathification process after that regime was overthrown. The former chief strategist in the Office of the Coordinator for Counterterrorism of the U.S. State Department, David Kilcullen, has said that there undeniably would be no ISIS if we had not invaded Iraq. It has been reported that Iraqis and Syrians have been given greater precedence over other nationalities within Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, because the group needs the loyalties of the local Sunni populations in both Syria and Iraq in order to be sustainable. Other reports, however, have indicated that Syrians are at a disadvantage to foreign members, with some native Syrian fighters resenting favoritism allegedly shown towards foreigners over pay and accommodation. In August 2016, media reports based on briefings by Western intelligence agencies suggested that Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant had a multi-level secret service known in Arabic as Amni, established in 2014. That has become a combination of an internal police force and an external operations directorate complete with regional branches. The unit was believed to be under the overall command of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's most senior Syrian operative, spokesman, and propaganda chief Abu Muhammad al-Adnani until his death by airstrike in late August 2016. Civilians in Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant controlled areas. In 2014, the Wall Street Journal estimated that 8 million people lived in the Islamic State. The United Nations Commission on Human Rights has stated that Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant seeks to subjugate civilians under its control and dominate every aspect of their lives through terror, indoctrination, and the provision of services to those who obey. Civilians, as well as the Islamic State itself, have released footage of some of the human rights abuses. Social control of civilians is, by imposition of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's reading of Sharia law, enforced by morality police forces known as Al-Hisbah and the All-Women Al-Qansah Brigade, a general police force, courts, and other entities managing recruitment, tribal relations, and education. Al-Hisbah is led by Abu Muhammad al-Jazrawi. Number of combatants. Estimates of the size of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's military vary widely, from tens of thousands up to 200,000. In early 2015, journalist Mary Ann Weaver estimated that half of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant fighters are foreigners. A UN report estimated a total of 15,000 fighters from over 80 countries were in Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant's ranks in November 2014. U.S. intelligence estimated an increase to around 20,000 foreign fighters in February 2015, including 3,400 from the Western world. In September 2015, the CIA estimated that 30,000 foreign fighters had joined Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. According to Abu Hayya, a former senior leader of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, foreign fighters receive food, petrol and housing, but unlike native Iraqi or Syrian fighters, they do not receive payment in wages. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?